Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Bailey. I am working on my change project right now, and this particular activity was about a budget of looking at the financial considerations for your change project. My change project is about postpartum hemorrhage. I'm coming up with a postpartum hemorrhage assessment tool to assess every patient that comes in for their risk, low, medium, or high, of postpartum hemorrhage. And then I'm also coming up with a quantitative blood loss measurement tool so that after every delivery we can do the quantitative blood loss, QBL, to see approximately how much blood has been lost after both cesareans and vaginal deliveries. So while doing this, there is a few financial considerations. In any type of change that you're trying to make to a facility, it's really important to consider these things, because there are a lot of times where if the change costs too much, your facility won't be able to approve it. So I did evaluate mine. There were a few things that we would have to spend money on in order to implement these things, but there are backup options also, and I will go over those in just a second. One thing that I know that we would have to spend money on are scales. They recommend that you have digital scales in every room and in your ORs, so that way you can weigh the blood saturated material in order to get quantitative blood loss. While doing research, I found that most small digital medical grade scales were anywhere from 200 to 300. Those were just a few that I looked up. But being that we have 8 labor rooms and 1 OR, that means we would have to purchase 9 scales. If you're putting the scales at the high end of the budget, the $300 end of the budget, that would mean it would cost about $2,700 in order to stock every room with a scale. A backup option for this, if we can't get scales in every room, would be to use the scales that we use to weigh newborns. I think it would be a good idea. In our facility, we have 1 newborn scale. I do think if we went with that option, we might need to get another one. That way we could keep one in the OR and have one out on the floor, and just clean it in between each room. But that would be a viable option if we aren't able to stock every room with scales. Thankfully, one thing is that our facility already has graduated under buttock drapes. That way you can get the precise measurement of fluid that's in the drape in order to do your QBL. So that's not something we would have to spend money on. Another thing, though, that we would have to budget for is the time. In order for me and anyone else that volunteers to come up with these assessment tools, we would have to account for someone possibly coming in on their day off, or a backup option for calling someone in on their day off is utilizing overstaff days. So, for instance, in our facility, if there's a day where we have too many nurses, we would call and put someone on ELC, which just basically means that they're on call, pretty much. So instead of putting them on call, we could bring them into the facility and just have them work with doing this project or helping with this project in order to get that done. AWHONN does recommend that you have dry weight cards laminated and attached to all scales for measurements of items that may become blood soaked when a woman's in labor or after giving birth. So that is something important that we would have to do. I would say 2 to 3 nurses, possibly 2, would be able to do it. It just depends on the days. I would think 2 to 3 nurses in 2 to 3 days would probably be able to get it done. 8-hour days would probably be fine. But utilizing ELC as a backup option, if you don't want to bring nurses in on their day off, would definitely work. So this is a big variable, but it just depends on what the nurses make. Depending on how much they make, this could cost around $2,400. in order to, if we had to bring nurses in on their day off. Utilizing ELC might be a little different, but just say $2,400 would be the budget for that. As I said, I think it would save money if we were able to utilize the ELC nurses, but we would have to see the schedule and how things go in order to do that. For this change project, there are a few things that are necessary to do in order to implement them. After implementing the change project, however, our hospital will officially be labeled as a maternal level 1 hospital. Being labeled as a designated maternal level 1 means that we can increase access care by developing, strengthening, and better defining relationships among facilities within the region. Basically just meaning that it labels the care that we can give, so that way if someone comes in and we need to transfer them out, we can look at the other designated hospitals and we can transfer them to the appropriate one, meaning a designated level 2, 3, 4, etc. Also, being labeled as a maternal level 1 hospital increases the amount of Medicaid reimbursements we get. With the amount of money we'll be reimbursed for Medicaid, this should help to cover the costs of hours and materials necessary in order to implement the project. It would be one of those things where the cost wouldn't be covered immediately. It would take some time in order to get reimbursed, obviously, from Medicaid, but eventually those scales and those hours that we put in would be covered by those reimbursements. That's the plan. There are things I'll suspect. These are the things that I think that we would need to budget for. Hopefully these changes will be approved. If they're not, like I said, I do have backup options, but I do think that the benefits of this change project would greatly outweigh the possible amount of money that we could spend, the benefits to our patients and to the hospital. So